in our neighborhood. We felt like staff was not listening at all to the concerns of the residents, and they were just out to build a super bridge. And it felt honestly like staff and the city council, for that matter, were just trying to push traffic into our neighborhood. There was absolutely no reason to build a bridge of that scale. Fast forward to where we are today, and it's just like we're back to the future. A new staff is in place with the city engineers. They like building big projects. They see big scope and they just want to build big things. And that's exactly what we are left with, which is another super bridge. And the only change from what was being advocated in Q4 2012 is that no longer would it be realigning the bridge so that Newell Road in East Palo Alto would align perfectly with Newell Road in Palo Alto. That's the only change, is to leave the bridge on the current alignment. But otherwise, staff is proposing doubling the width and doubling the length of the bridge from what is presently there today. And that represents huge concerns, not just for myself and for Herb, but for most of the neighbors in our neighborhood.
Sure. Okay. Irv, do you want to share some of your concerns?
Yeah, so in the email that I sent earlier this week, last week, I guess now, I talk about some of the things, and I'm an intellectual property lawyer, a patent lawyer by background, and formed a couple of startup companies in the software space. But so I approach things from a technical point of view, and so the widening of the bridge, it seems to me, makes the bridge more dangerous for a number of reasons. Uh, the it's my understanding that for the 100+ years the bridge has been in existence, there are no recorded vehicular accidents that have occurred on the bridge. And as far as I know, there's been no mention of any pedestrian or biking accidents that have been raised. And I think the reason that the bridge is so safe from a transport point of view is that the narrowness of the car lanes force everybody to slow down significantly as they approach the entry to cross the bridge. And I know whenever I go across the bridge in either direction, I'm very careful and go very, very slowly. I think the widening of those lanes significantly as proposed, people will come sweeping around those entrances into the onto the bridge, and I think create much more of a hazard than now exists. In addition, with wider lanes, I think we will see more speeding, not only across the bridge itself, but on both entrances and exits from the bridge on both sides of the bridge. Uh, and what Ben expressed about the concerns of the neighborhood of more and faster driving automobile traffic definitely raises more questions about the safety of people and students that use the bridge to and from school and work on both sides of the bridge. So I think that is one of the serious concerns. Um, the as far as the safety of the bridge from a structural point of view, no one has raised the question of its being obsolete. Um, it's the issues really have revolved around the question of flooding, and as I mentioned in my email, um, we've sort of got two different constituencies within the community that are on opposite sides of this issue because the people that are concerned about flooding, certainly that's a concern. But then by widening the bridge to the extent that's being proposed, it raises the concerns that I raised in my letter. One of the other things that it would be temporary, but yet at the same time disconcerting and disruptive on on both sides of the bridge, and that is the project is, from what I've read, is scheduled to take a year or longer. And that means that there'll be no one able to cross to and from either side of the bridge, which will be very disruptive. The materials I've read in the EIR suggest that there will be all kinds of construction noise. There are going to be air and water pollution problems. There's going to be endangerment of creek wildlife. And all that's and equipment that will be have to be stored on and around the construction of the bridge. So that in itself will be very disruptive for the community. The other thing that I think a much wider bridge will result in is developers replacing residential housing with high-rise office buildings in East Palo Alto, displacing all current residents. And I can't believe that those people that currently live in those properties would be pleased with that, nor would I think the people on the Palo Alto side of the bridge be pleased with that. And of course, I think long-term, with more traffic, and I think there will be more traffic with a wider bridge. In fact, I think it could turn into a speedway along Newell. That there will be continuing increased air and noise pollution from the increased traffic. And then my biggest concern at this point in time is, and I know supposedly the joint powers or somebody has said they've got the funding, but you know, in these terrible times of the pandemic and the economic hardship it's going to inflict on people on both sides of the bridge, this doesn't seem like a good time to spend taxpayer money on something that is not absolutely necessary at this point in time. And I'm not sure that there aren't other ways that the flooding issue can't be dealt with. You know, at one time they talked about tide pools being built so that excess water can be diverted so it doesn't flow under the bridge here. So there's just a lot of concerns. I've actually done a more detailed analysis of the complete EIR, but I didn't want to burden you with it at this point in time, but I'm happy to do so as our discussion proceeds.
And Greg, I know our time is short, and so just a couple of other things that I wanted to add. You know, one, flooding is absolutely a concern, and mitigating the flooding is paramount. There's absolutely no question about that. However, a solution should not pit residents against each other. So there's those residents around the Pope Chaucer Bridge for whom flooding is the #1 priority. And then there's other residents around the Newell Road Bridge for whom traffic and mitigating traffic is a paramount objective. And there is a solution that has been at least evaluated, which is a single lane car bridge that allows for pedestrian and bikes to safely cross as well. But staff has just summarily rejected that option at every turn. And yet it's the only option that effectively preserves the look and feel of our neighborhood, which they state is one of the primary objectives right out in the scoping mechanism. They've repeatedly said that they have to have 2 bike lanes and 2 pedestrian lanes, yet there was never any pedestrian or bike traffic data as part of the draft EIR, and only recently did a modest amount of data emerge, but post all of the review process. You know, so in a democratic process, all we have is the process to give us comfort that all of the concerns that those of us who have raised are being addressed. And yet when there's no data given on pedestrian traffic, on bike traffic, no explanation given as to why with such limited pedestrian and bike traffic, there have to be 2 dedicated lanes for pedestrian, 2 sidewalks and 2 bike lanes, seems crazy, because all that does is creates more space for people to speed. And that there is absolutely no doubt. Additionally, staff has ignored, they rely on a TIRE, all capital, analysis for their assessment of traffic impact. But that TIRE analysis is completely irrelevant in a residential neighborhood like we have here. We have seen traffic by staff's own data increase in excess of 70% over the last 4 years. And they're saying that with a much wider bridge, there will be no marginal impact, a 2 to 4% increase in traffic. And that's just absurd. The actual data doesn't even bear that out with just given what we have seen. They've not analyzed the impacts of Waze, Google Maps, other online navigation tools. They've not taken into account the Stanford development projects that they have. And so none of that has been even evaluated as part of the traffic analysis. And so that leads to considerable frustration on behalf of residents in our neighborhood.
So what was the reason, I haven't asked staff this question yet, but what's the rationale for going to a bigger bridge? What's the need for that right now? Like what was the rationale given?
They've not given any rationale other than modern day bridges have 2 lanes for car traffic, 2 lanes for pedestrian, and 2 lanes for bike. That's what they have said. Then originally, and Greg, I have no idea if it's still available, as part of the 2009 federal stimulus package, there was a lot of infrastructure dollars that were allocated to repairing bridges. So back in 2012, staff had represented that 80% of a very large bridge would be covered under a Caltrans Department of Transportation grant. Now, whether or not money from 2009 stimulus package is still available, I have no idea. But those 2 things, just modern day bridges have all of these things. They didn't take into account the scope, the look and feel of the neighborhood and what we were trying to preserve. And then I think funding was another piece of the equation. Best I can tell. Staff has never actually said why. So to really understand that's a question you'd have to pose to staff.
Yeah. So, I actually mentioned this during the budget meeting this week, you guys might not know, but the city has a severe budget shortfall or revenue shortfall that we're trying to deal with. And one of the ways of dealing with this is to delay some of the capital infrastructure projects, like bridges as an example, so that because like right now, this year, like this quarter and next year, we're probably gonna have a pretty significant hit to our revenue. So by delaying the capital budgets a bit, it leaves money for police and fire and other services that the city could provide. So one of the things that we've been discussing is, well, can we delay some of these capital projects? And I brought this project up, Newell, mainly because I was thinking that, well, there seems to be some controversy on this project, at least from what I could tell. And maybe this should be delayed to allow some of the stuff to be worked out first before the project proceeds. Because I think there's a lot of capital projects in general that need to be worked on, and a lot of services that people want to keep during these tough economic times. So maybe we should do projects first that are kind of have more consensus behind them. So anyway, so I brought that up, and then some people emailed me afterwards saying, hey, actually this project is fully paid for. And I don't know if it's true or not, because I haven't asked staff, but that's what some people have told me, that other organizations are going to fully fund this project, and that might be the case. I'm not entirely sure. I haven't actually fact checked any of this, but this is what some people have told me.
Yeah.
But anyways, that's why it was kind of interesting for me to actually talk with you guys about this, because I've heard, I've seen the emails, and I know that there's people concerned about this, and I'm always leery about moving forward on projects when there's a lot of contention still. So, but let me ask you this: for what is, in your guys' opinion, and I know you guys haven't done a scientific survey, but just a rough feel. How many people do you think, at least on the Palo Alto side, I'm not going to ask about the East Palo Alto side, but on the Palo Alto side, do you think support the current project? What's your best guess?
I'd say I think very few people support it. If you look at the survey data again, when we polled 144 residents back in Q4 of 2012, by far the preferred option was remove the bridge entirely, right? By far and away. Then the second most popular choice was a single lane bridge for car traffic, right? Because everybody gets, we can't solve, we have to mitigate flood issues. Everybody gets that. So removing the bridge absolutely mitigates flood issues, hands down, no issue at all. That's not the responsible thing to do, though, in my opinion, right? There needs to be a vehicular bridge of some form to connect and replace the functionality of what is there today. Sure. So I think there is broad-based support for a single lane car bridge with a pedestrian and bike access as well, without a doubt, because that then provides a natural governor on speeding, right? Because you have to come to a full and complete stop. You got to wait before you can proceed in exactly the same way that the bridge functions today. Every car that crosses that bridge, my wife and I walked right by it this afternoon, and I watched a car from East Palo Alto coming in stop completely, then proceeded very cautiously. In my opinion, it is the safest bridge in Palo Alto because everybody knows that they've got to go slowly.
Yeah, I second that it's a very safe bridge from a vehicular and crossing point of view. And I think what Ben said about not wanting to pit two different constituencies within the community against one another. And, you know, at some point in time, maybe more appropriate in time as, you know, a means of correcting some issues, what about the possibility of a bridge that might even contemplate two narrow lanes, but also a single bike lane and single pedestrian lane, but put off at some time in the future? I think it just looks bad. It doesn't matter who's putting up the funds, because in the end, it's all taxpayer money. And to do this at a time when we're facing this terrible pandemic that people on both sides of the bridge are suffering from, and what could be a very difficult economy going forward in the next few years, I think just sends a bad message to everyone. And anyway, that's my sense of the situation.
So I'm actually a fairly frequent taker of this bridge. I don't live near this bridge, but I take it because I when I bike to Home Depot, I take that bridge. So I go through there, and then I take it. There's a yeah. So anyway, that's a path that I take. So I'm actually quite familiar with it. And then there's like the overpass.
Yes.
Yeah. My own personal observation is, I felt. I mean, it's very little traffic actually. So I felt like when I've taken it, I've never felt scared. I feel scared when I go over San Antonio on a bike. That's, as a biker, that's scary. But on this bridge, a Newell Bridge, I feel okay. I mean, it doesn't feel because at least when I've been there, it's been such little traffic that so it does make me wonder, like, do we need a much bigger bridge? But there's not a lot of traffic right now. Although I suppose during rush hour, maybe there's a lot of traffic.
Yeah, there is a rush hour, and in fact, a lot of times at rush hour, cars will back up in the streets that feed into the bridge, particularly on that side of Edgewood, between Southwood and Edgewood and Center and those streets. That traffic is backed up even on the current bridge during rush hour. So, but
Greg,
the point, and your experience with the bridge, I think, bears out the fact that from a crossing point of view, the bridge is not unsafe.
Well, I never felt unsafe as a biker when I biked across it. I mean, it seemed okay to me, but sorry, Ben, you were going to say something?
No, all I was going to say is when you look at the traffic data that is presented, the vehicular traffic, it's all about the morning rush hour coming from East Palo Alto into Palo Alto, and then the afternoon traffic. And that's really where all of the concerns are. Newell Road in Palo Alto, as you know, is a safe route to school because you have both Duveneck Elementary and then Green Middle School that are directly in the path of that. And so there's high sensitivities to any type of speeding in that corridor at all. So anything at all that increases the possibility of more traffic, faster speeds, is of great concern for everybody.
I mean, as it is, I live right on the corner of Edgewood and Newell, and there's been a long history of people running those stop signs at the corner of Newell and Edgewood, and a lot of tickets have been given out over the years to people who don't obey those stop signs, and I think the wider lanes would just encourage more of that.
So I know that the kind of main motivation for this project is to reduce flooding, right, or chance of flooding, so that everyone's going to reduce their flood insurance, right? And that's the basic idea. So it sounds like there's still some concern about the design of it. I don't know whether if it's true that we actually have all this funding from other government agencies. I don't know if there's risk if risk of loss of funding if it takes them longer. So I don't know. That's something I don't know. Do you guys know if there's any risk?
If what staff is telling you is true, then 80% of the funding back in 2012 was supposedly coming from the 2009 federal stimulus package through the California Caltrans Department of Transportation. I don't know how that funding works, how that could be preserved since, basically 2009, 2010 era, we're now fully 10 years later, if that money is still available from Caltrans. That grant never covered 100%, was my understanding of what was told. Then in subsequent years, Proposition B passed at the county level that notionally has some dollars. I don't know how those dollars are allocated. There was talk both amongst the JPA at one point, as well as City of Palo Alto, that funding might be available to help offset a Palo Alto city budget with county funds. But again, the whole funding and whether applications had been filed, grants had been made, money had been, put in a bank account, no idea how that works. My inquiries, oddly enough, into the Caltrans and how the grant process worked got shut down. I was evidently asking too many questions. And because I'm not an employee of the City of Palo Alto, they stopped talking with me.
I don't know if they should be doing that. I think
is that the plan still contemplates, if they move forward, with some funding from both the City of Palo Alto and East Palo Alto. So with tight budgets, and I'm sure the East Palo Alto budgetary situation is probably no better than the Palo Alto situation, it's still going to place a burden on both of those communities.
Yeah. So speaking of East Palo Alto, do you guys know, how does the East Palo Alto people feel about this project? Do you guys have any idea?
The feedback when I've met, because I've attended meetings at the City Council of East Palo Alto, and they strongly want a bridge, and they're strong advocates of a very large bridge. I attended their 30-year planning meeting where, as Irv pointed out, they did not rule out the potential to develop 8-story structures on the East Palo Alto side, of our bridge, which would be for mixed-use purposes, so retail on the bottom and then residential apartments above. Obviously, the fact that they didn't preclude that says that is coming someday. And so then the only thing that we want in our neighborhood is that would be disastrous, because that just pushes massive amounts of traffic. We already have parking issues because East Palo Alto is underparked. Edgewood Drive looks like a parking lot by day and even by night. That's another topic that we'll need to address at some point, because that isn't what our neighborhood should be. So best I can tell, East Palo Alto strongly favors as big a bridge as possible.
I see. Okay, interesting. So actually, I think we have one other person who just joined. Daniel, do you want to quickly introduce yourself? We only have about 3 minutes here. So Daniel, do you have any, you're joining the conversation a little bit later, but is there anything you wish to say?
No, actually, I was actually just here listening. Yeah, sorry.
Okay, no problem. If you have an opinion, though, you're certainly welcome to share it. Okay, so East Palo Alto wants the biggest bridge possible, and then on the Palo Alto side, it sounds like there's a lot of concern among the people that live there about this. Wow. Okay.
Well, again, Greg,
I'm
since our time is limited, I'd wrap up with what I started. I want to solve, I can't say solve, I want to mitigate flooding issues. And I say mitigate because my understanding, the only way to eliminate flood insurance for residents is if you were to solve for a 100-year event. And this does not solve for a 100-year event. So that isn't going to happen. But mitigating the need for flood insurance, right? Even though you still may have to pay for that insurance, but mitigating the disruption, and it's a significant disruption. Having lived through that in 1998, nobody wants to go through that, nor should they, right? So that needs to be solved post haste, but it shouldn't be solved at the expense of creating daily nightmares for people, all right? We haven't had a significant flood since 1998, and I'm not saying that. So because the overhang and the mental anguish for many of that event has created, long-lasting issues. But I've been living now for the last 10 years plus with significant increase in traffic. And so building a bigger bridge only exacerbates that problem. So we've got to find a way to mitigate flooding and preserve traffic flows at a similar level to what would exist if the current bridge were left in place, knowing that that's not feasible.
Yeah, I also think that the point about the residents in the East Palo Alto side, the immediate ones, if they thought that a lot of those buildings would be torn down and new, more expensive high-rise apartments or office buildings would go up, and they would be displaced from their current housing because they couldn't afford the new housing, I think a lot of those people would not be supportive of a wider new bridge at this point.
Okay. So guys, I think we're gonna have to leave it at that. I really appreciate you guys' feedback. This helps me understand the situation better. If you have any other thoughts or suggestions on this, let me know. There's no active agenda item right now in front of us, but it's something that came up during the budget meeting. So I'm actually, this helps me get smarter about what's going on. So thank you guys for taking time out of your Sunday to chat with me. I really appreciate it.
We appreciate your time as well. Thanks so much.
Yes,
of course.
William, thanks for your help in setting it up.
Yeah. Would it make sense for us to contact other members of the city council? And there's no meeting date yet for the supposed.
I think so. I think like we're supposed to represent the city, but it's hard for us to be experts on every single little thing. So the reason why I have these office hours is because I need to talk to people who actually are there and actually are experiencing the issues.
Yes.
And so I think other council members also appreciate that.
Good.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah, thank you so much, guys. Okay,
Have a great
bye.
day.
Bye.